We talk about Figma a lot on this channel, which kind of makes no sense because Figma's for designers, not developers, and we're a developer channel. That said, Figma's more and more crucial to our workflows as developers, especially more web and application-focused devs, because Figma's where the ideas that our product teams or individuals have shape with the designers what the thing should be, and then we go and code it. There's been a lot of work to make things like AI tools that will turn your Figma designs into code that actually works and runs. But the tools that bridge this gap and make it easier for developers to be meaningfully involved with and using Figma itself, that gap hasn't been bridged. Sure, we can export SVGs and CSS from our Figma code, but that's not enough. Usually we're just using it for mocks and then recreating everything in our code bases. This might finally change though, because Figma's made a massive acquisition I never would have expected. And this acquisition is squarely targeting developers like ourselves here. So what the hell's going on? Figma bought Dynaboard. If you don't already know Dynaboard, which is totally understandable, I wasn't super familiar before, it's a low-code, AI supercharged IDE, but it's actually focused on the IDE part. It wants to be a way to build with code actual web applications. From my quick read through of all the features and things that Dynaboard supports, it seems like a hybrid trying to combine what you would do with something like the Wix Codex design tools, as well as something like Retool and how it gives you a single surface area to attach random data sources to third-party providers, to auth layers, to all these things with a single interface where you can write code to get these things to come together. And then the design is something you don't do. The design, like how the UI looks, how the buttons work, how all those things behave, that's abstracted into the component system that they've built for you. Our job when we use it is to use code to link all these parts together. It's a very interesting place for Figma to dive in. And the more I think about it, the more I realize it kind of makes sense. Some quick important context here. Back in June of 2022, they raised $6.6 million in seed funding. It's important to know that that's not the value of the company. That's the money they raised, probably less than 30% of the company, likely even less than that. Like when I raised, we sold way less than 10% of the company in our raise. So giving up more than 30 would be absurd. If we assume a conservative 20%, we do a little bit of math here, that would be 6.6, and this would be over a value that we don't know, compared to 20 over 100. So times 100 divided by 20, $33 million valuation in 2022, assuming not great percentage of the company being sold. If it was 10% instead of 20, you can double that number, which would be totally realistic. So this company, by my estimates, valued itself in 2022 between $30 and $60 million. Chances are they were struggling to succeed with that pitch over time, and raising more money when your valuation's already that high becomes really difficult. They convinced investors from all of these places, including but not limited to Mantis, the Chainsmokers, yes, like the band The Chainsmokers, as well as these other firms, as well as individuals from all these places. These people all invested in a company that they believed was worth at least $30 million. There's no way over the last 2 years they've become more valuable than that. And if they spent the money that they raised at the time, they were probably running out of it. And if they were struggling to find investors that would believe in them enough to invest against a higher valuation, then they can't raise more money, then they die. Because $6 million over 2 years is not a great burn overall, specifically because this is a seed round. This is pre-Series A. They were still early stage in every regard other than the amount of money they had. So here we can see in 2021, 2022, there was just insane amounts of deals of companies getting money invested in them. These numbers are really hard to calculate super accurately, but you could see 2021 to 2022, the numbers were really big. And then as 2022 ended and 2023 started, things started to get worse. So it makes sense that now, if they were raising during this huge peak bubble, and we're also offering to compete with Retool, which was one of the biggest recent early stage startups in terms of how fast it grew. They went from tiny to multi-billion-dollar company in like 3 years. The possibility of grabbing some of that market was really exciting to these investors, many of which probably felt like they missed out on the Retool deal. And since they feel like they missed that Retool deal, they're now actively looking for potential competitors to take some of that market, which if you're raising in that market, you can get a good amount of money for a pretty good deal. So with all that in mind, it's hard to know for sure what the state of the company was. But my guess is they were low on money and didn't have a great path to make a lot of money long term, but they did have a good path to work with a company like Figma to help them achieve their goals. So let's talk a bit about those goals. Dynaboard aimed to bridge the gap between idea and production. We believe Figma to be the best place to continue our work. Designers and developers globally use Figma to design and build phenomenal digital products. We've long been inspired by the groundbreaking multiplayer canvas, their commitment to a high standard of excellence, and their fun-loving creative spirit. Dynaboard is excited to be joining Figma to magnify our impact together. As we integrate into Figma, we'll be phasing out Dynaboard services on April 30th this year. We have paused new registrations and billing. Our current customers will be notified via email with more information and best steps for transitioning your applications and tools. Interesting, this is a full shutdown. I would not have guessed that immediately, but makes sense. My guess is they're being brought on to use some amount of their code, but more of their expertise to build something similar within Figma. Because Figma has been very clearly trying to target devs more. I know this because they're hitting me up all of the time to join their, I think it's like the Figma Associates or something. I don't remember what it's called. Oh, ambassadors. They really want me to be a Figma ambassador. And I haven't done it because I don't shill things on my channel that I don't use regularly. And it's not because Figma's bad. It's just not where I spend my time right now. So not surprised that they're going through all of these angles and loops to try and get devs to think about Figma more, use it more, and eventually develop their applications using Figma. To our dedicated customers, collaborators, and community, your enthusiasm and creativity have made this the adventure of a lifetime. We are forever grateful you made a bet on us and shared our dream of making web applications easier to build. We hope you enjoyed using Dynaboard as much as we enjoyed building it. Happy hacking, Alex. Overall, solid blog post. It's not quite as apologetic to the users that are getting screwed as I would have liked. I don't know how many there are and how valuable those users are. I get why they're doing what they're doing. I don't know how many employees are at this company. It seems relatively small. Yeah, it looks like there are 6 associated members, which is not always the most reliable thing, but 2 to 10 employees sounds about right. This acquisition is only possible because of how much the Figma Adobe breakup sucked. You should probably watch my Adobe gives up on developers video before going too deep into this one, because I think it's useful context. Figma was supposed to be acquired by Adobe. It failed because of regulations in the EU and concerns about monopolistic practices. We could debate all day whether or not that was valid. Regardless, Figma got a $1 billion breakup fee from Adobe that they're now using to do acquisitions like this. So this type of purchase might have been in talks before the Adobe Figma stuff even started, much less the breakup happened. But the additional money makes it much easier for them to do things like this. Interesting overall. One more useful detail about these types of acquisitions is pretty often when a company like Figma that's not publicly traded is acquiring a company like Dynaboard, they're not just paying out a flat fee. So if this Dynaboard acquisition was $10 million, theoretically, Figma's not handing $10 million to the owners of Dynaboard. They are allowing them to trade some percentage of the stock for equivalent valued, again, unlisted Figma private equity. So if Figma's worth $10 billion and Dynaboard's worth $10 million, they would take some amount of the stock that exists at Figma, in this case, 1% of it, and they would give that out to the Dynaboard employees or stockholders, whoever, as an exchange. This also happens when a company is acquired. An example on the publicly traded side is that when I was an owner of Slack stock and then Salesforce bought them, my stock got traded into Salesforce stock. Some amount of it was paid out cash immediately. Some amount of it became stock at Salesforce. That's probably what's happening here. So these employees, they don't just take this money and run. They now have to be part of the Figma bet, so to speak. In order for their stock to be worth something in the future, they have to help Figma get to the point where it can IPO, at which point the stock they've now traded has some value. This is part of why these acquisitions aren't as immediately lucrative and exciting as people seem to think, because even if Dynaboard's founders get $100 million out of this exchange, that's stock on a vesting schedule that is only worth something if the company succeeds. So you're actually kind of giving up a little bit of your control during these acquisitions, where the founders of Dynaboard now are part of a bigger machine that they don't have much control of. They might be able to help in certain ways, but the value of their stock is no longer determined by their efforts. It's determined by the leadership at the place that they got acquired by. So as exciting and lucrative as these deals might seem initially, it's not always the case. In order to really understand the impact here, we need to see a bit more of Figma's strategy around devs. Last year, Figma announced Dev Mode, which is a new space in Figma for devs with features that help you translate designs into code faster. I have a whole video where I go a bit more in depth on what's exciting and different about the Figma dev mode stuff. But as you see here, it generates production-ready CSS snippets, primarily for your code design systems. They even have the ability to spit out, in this case, that is a bunch of Swift UI code. It's cool that it has those options, but again, it's just CSS and design stuff. Keep work aligned and connected. Streamline your workflow and stop jumping between your design libraries, codebase, and project management tools when you bring everything together in Figma. Project management tools, are they going after linear as well? That'll be fun. Oh no, they have it right there as a plugin. Generally, it seems like a lot of Figma's focus here isn't just adding code to Figma, it's building an integration layer between Figma and all the other pieces that developers work with. Because developers are kind of where these parts meet. The gap between the design team and your issue tracker is often the engineers in the middle. So having the developer tool focus on integrating GitHub, Jira, Storybook, Linear, all the types of things alongside your designs in one place kind of makes Figma the home base for how your company orchestrates development. Since design is what leads the development projects in a lot of these companies, it makes sense that Figma could become the home for all of that. It's also particularly funny when you realize just how bad Adobe is at handling developers, that Figma is going like opposite way here. Very, very interesting stuff. They even put out a VS Code extension because, again, they're not pretending they can build the solutions to all of these problems. They're focused on integrating with existing solutions to make a good experience. Teams using Figma increased development efficiency by 35%. There's even a report about that. Cool. But specifically, this isn't just like org efficiency. This is development efficiency up by 35%. That's nuts. That's crazy that in the current state, devs using Figma are already accelerating that much more. I'm excited to see where this goes. I do want to offer a quick life raft to any of the people who are being dropped. There's a couple cool options here. Obviously, Retool is the popular one that everyone knows. Beautiful website. My CTO used to work at Retool, so very, very familiar with the product. Wow, they really won up their website. Cool to see. There's also an open source alternative, which I highly recommend because if it's open source, you're much less at risk of this thing disappearing when it gets acquired. You can host it yourself if you need. Refine is dope. Quick bias check. I'm an investor in Refine. They were in Y Combinator, and as soon as I saw what they were building, I knew I had to throw money at them because I'm really hyped about it. Refine is a React-based open source tool for low-code building and attaching all of these different crazy data sources. I think this picture perfectly summarizes what is exciting about Refine to me, where there are a ton of different places that you might be getting data from, be it platforms like frameworks, be it auth providers, data providers, live services, integrations like React Table, React Hook Form, access control stuff, and Refine is the layer that let you combine all those things. I'd almost flip this a little bit where I'd put like React and Next and those things on the other side and say that Refine is the layer that lets you take all of these things and then render them in the ways you want to. Really, really powerful stuff. And if you're looking for a way to do this, that's open source and headless and pretty easy to adopt. So what do you think? Are you a dev that uses Figma or are you a Figma user that hates devs? Really curious what your thoughts are. Let me know in the comments, and in the future, we can talk more about Figma. Thank you guys as always, and until next time, peace nerds.